This is the webinar on reopening guidelines, IBank loans, and other resources from the governor's office. We have the pleasure to have a great selection of speakers with us. We have Kathleen Kelly-Janis, the Senior Advisor on Social Innovation in the Office of Governor Gavin Newsom. We have Chris Dombrowski, Acting Director of the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GoBiz. We have Isabel Guzman, Director of the Office of Small Business Advocate, also at GoBiz. We have Emily Burgos, Small Business Finance Center Manager at IBank, or the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, known as IBank. We have Jan Masaoka, who has already been speaking a little bit, CEO at CalNonprofits. And then we have me, I'm again, Lucy Salcido-Carter, the Policy Director at CalNonprofits. And this is the webinar on reopening guidelines, IBank loans, and other resources from the governor's office.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everybody. You know, we have over 1,200 people registered for today's webinar, so that's very exciting and shows that people really want to hear these topics from these panelists. And I did want to just start by saying, you know, I personally am just struggling today with all the things going on in the world. It's just tough. And in particular, you know, when we see what's going on in the White House, what they're doing to inflame hate against African Americans, to make it harder to vote, you know, sometimes it can feel like, you know, government is just another instrument of injustice. And so that's why it feels especially good today that we get to spend an hour with government people that are on the right side. And they're on the right side, meaning that they're doing their best to serve communities that are in need, and also the nonprofits that not only serve our communities, but also speak for our communities. So, so thanks all of you for the work that you're doing in the governor's office, and it's great to be able to work with the government offices that are on our side. So it's a good way to start today, actually. I'm going to introduce briefly Chris Dombrowski. You saw there he is. He has a beard since that photo was taken of him that we put up, but it's the same guy, I think, anyway. He's the acting director of what's called GoBiz, G-O-B-I-Z, and that sounds like it's some kind of an initiative, but it's actually a government office. It's short for the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz. And so Chris is going to tell us about what we need to know about reopening. Thanks, Chris.
Well, thank you, Jan and Lucy, for having myself, but all of us here from the governor's office and having this opportunity to talk to all of you. So thank you for your time as well. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the roadmap and the resilience roadmap. And so I'm going to talk through a little bit of our website, and I know that I think there will be distributing a link to it for you all. So this is the covid19.ca.gov website, but if you do a /roadmap, that is where you'll find a lot of this guidance documents and the timelines that have been laid out, as well as the county variance. And so taking a step back, and there it is. So taking a step back, this really started around a month ago. Our office, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, started working with our counterparts at Department of Industrial Relations, CalOSHA, as well as the California Department of Public Health, CDPH. And so we were working with our colleagues around starting to write these guidance documents for individual industry sectors. And so it started about a month ago, when we had the essential business designation put in place. What we saw was a lot of these essential businesses, and I think a great example is in the retail sector. So you had essential retailers and grocery stores start to put together best practices to not only keep their workforce safe, but to keep their customers safe as well. And so we really took to heart a lot of the ideas and modifications they were making to their business around physical distancing, sanitation, and things of the like. And worked with industry and labor to start crafting industry-specific guidelines for those essential businesses. And that was largely stage one. And you saw those go out for those essential industries in stage one and have been posted ever since. And so those guidance documents included things around the lines of performing a detailed risk assessment and site-specific protection plan, best practices around training employees and how to limit the spread of COVID-19, implement individual control measures and screenings, implement disinfecting protocols, and implement physical distancing guidelines, again, for those individual industries and sectors. And so it's a recognition as we put these guidelines in place and as employers adopt them. You know, the reality is that COVID is not going to go away. It's here to stay, at least for a while, until we start to develop better therapeutics and a possible vaccine. And so really what we do need to do is encourage our employees, encourage our employers, and our customers as well on what are these best practices around limiting the spread of COVID-19. We can't erase the spread, but we can try to take steps to mitigate the risk. And again, this is all about buying down the risk and limiting the spread. And so again, we've worked on these specific guidelines. And so where we are now, obviously, is the state itself is in stage 2. And so you now see this site is populated with a few more industries and guidance documents that make up stage 2. And again, that includes things like places of worship and outdoor museums, which have since been added to the statewide plan. Where I can tell that people get confused or where confusion can arise is obviously in how the counties and the state are working on this. And so let me try to explain this as simply as I possibly can. But essentially, counties do have the ability to move both faster and slower through the stages of reopening. And so you've seen the governor talk a lot about this as how the state is playing a role of saying, how do places and sectors reopen? And counties will determine a lot of the when. And so on this website, you'll see that there is a county variance page right there. And so that county variance page will take you to the county variance documents that have been submitted to the Department of Public Health. And so what you'll see that different counties can submit attestations, things around the number of contact tracers they have, the hospital capacity that they have. The things that we need to see that they know that they've taken, again, they've hit specific metrics that they can allow themselves to reopen at a faster pace than the state as a whole. And so those counties will have the opportunity to move through stage 3 faster. And where you see that playing out now is around dine-in restaurants. You see that around barbershops and hair salons. And very soon, and I know that timing is always the question we get, but it will be soon, there will be additional industries that start to have guidance put up and allow these counties to open up new sectors of the economy, things like indoor museums. So again, that county variance page will have those specific guidance documents listed there for the new industries that come online. And then it'll also take you to the page where you can see which counties have passed the attestation process. Again, that's the specific metrics they need to hit and that are attested by both their public health officer and their board of supervisors and reviewed by the CDPH. And so right now we actually do have somewhere, I want to say the number always changes daily, but I think we're at 51 different counties have passed that attestation process. And so again, we recognize that you know, as we move through the months and the weeks ahead, the situation may evolve, it may change. And so it's going to be incredibly important that counties are the essentially your main source for what is allowed to be open and what needs to happen in those counties. And so you'll see, you know, nobody wants to see this, but there's always the potential of increased transmission, outbreaks in local communities. And so counties may have to take the step of what we call dialing back some of the reopening or putting in further restrictions as time goes on. And again, this is how the system's designed, is that we can look at this from a regional perspective and factor in the regional factors that are all going into the possibility of a spread of the COVID-19. So again, you have the main page, the roadmap for recovery that outlines where the state is at. You have the guidelines for the statewide sectors that have been opened. Then you have the county variance page for the county, again, those counties that have passed the attestation process, now at 51. And then you have the industries that are being allowed to come online there. And then I guess I just would add that I know that for many of you, your sectors are still in sort of wait mode, but it is expected that we are going to continue to move through stage 3, especially in these counties, in the very, very near future. So with that, I think are we doing questions next
Yes.
for me? Okay, great.
We've got some questions for you. We have a lot of questions for you. Thanks, Chris. That's really helpful. We have questions from people who work in theater companies, and they're wondering about classes, and they're wondering about audiences for performances. How does that fall in the roadmap, and where is there information that can help them?
Yeah, so we are currently working on this with our CDPH and around what is the timing for this. Obviously, live audiences is something that is of later in stage 3, hopefully. I think it depends on the size of the theater, and that's still what we're trying to work on. Obviously, you see that we've been very clear around live sporting events and concerts, that those are not going to be in stage 3. I think that there is, certainly, we are looking at basically, because you start thinking around movie theaters, you start thinking around smaller venues that are seated, that can accommodate physical distancing, and those types of modifications that we need to see in order to limit the spread. That is the kind of thing that we are in conversation with CDPH on when that should be. And again, we are trying to keep an eye on the situation on the ground, and how these cases are potentially changing as we reopen more sectors of our economy. So that is something we're keeping a close eye on.
Okay, great, thank you. And we had a similar question, but there's a local symphony orchestra that performs in multiple venues. So they perform in schools, they perform in churches, they perform in concert halls, and they're just wondering do they have to respond to different sets of guidelines for each of those multiple venues?
Hopefully, and again, I think I'd be happy to hear more specifics from them directly, but hopefully a lot of the guidance that they will have to follow will be not too different for them, that there'll be a lot of similarities between the two, and things around, again, physical distancing of the performers will be key for their workforce.
Okay, great. We have a question about summer camps. What are the guidelines for summer camps?
We're obviously we're working on schools guidance and camp guidance right now. I hope that will be an update that we have in the coming days. I think we are just trying to finish that up again with our counterparts, both at CDPH, but also that obviously involves all the schools, and so a lot of the with Department of Education as well. So we are optimistic that will be soon.
Okay, great. And then we also had a question about synagogues, but it would be true for all places of worship. Where can people find guidelines about places of worship? And, there were some detailed questions about, the 25% capacity and those kinds of things, and just wondering how to prepare the people in their church or synagogue or other place of worship for the guidelines going forward. Bat mitzvahs, bar mitzvahs, high holidays, those kinds of things. What can they say to the people in their congregations?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, because we've talked to a lot of faith leaders around the state, and it's been a really interesting conversation, and there are those places of worship that don't want to open at all, and there are those that are obviously wanting to open now and do so safely. And so the first thing I would just say is that, there is no requirement for any of venues to open, particularly if they feel their congregation is of a real high risk and vulnerable population. We do have a strong encouragement. We have the guidelines put up on the main roadmap webpage for the guidance. And so there is guidance there for how to safely reopen. But again, recognizing that, this is an activity that we do see as higher risk. There is a lot of people coming together. There's a lot of mingling. There's potentially singing and dancing. And so therefore, Department of Public Health did put in for the first 21 days a cap of 25% of building capacity or a maximum of 100 attendees, which is lower. Again, that was for 21 days. We're trying to really see what, again, that these guidelines and these processes that are put in place can really buy down the risk of spread of transmission, particularly around physical distancing. And so again, this is something that we're just sort of keeping an eye on and watching right now. But obviously the hope is that these types of modifications and again, as we educate not only our places of worship, our businesses, our employees, our congregations, our customers, as this education around what we can do to buy down risk continues to be spread, then hopefully we can buy down the spread of the virus and again, start to safely reopen and worry less about hard caps of numbers and more around the actual modifications. So the physical distancing, the sanitation, the things that we know that can keep the virus from spreading as greatly as it could.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a question, and I think this will be true for many health and human services, about group therapy, group sessions, programs that really involve groups of people, up to like 30 people. What is the estimated timeline before these kinds of treatment groups will be able to meet again? And in some ways, social distancing is quite a challenge given room space, that nonprofits have a limited amount of space to work with and yet want to be able to serve a certain number of people.
And just apologies for this, but it's not physical treatment, it's more mental health treatment?
Yes, it sounds like it's more kind of a group, yes, mental health, behavioral health.
Okay, let me, so I do believe that by following the office place guidance, that you could safely reopen. That feels to me like that's the best place and the type of guidance you would need to follow for having a group of people come together and have, you know, again, conversations around different topics. I think, you know, what we tried to do is talk about, you know, we talked about therapy in far as places of worship and how that should follow the office guidance. So I believe that is how to do so.
Okay, great. And then we have a couple of questions around schools and childcare. And thank you for taking all these questions. It's so helpful to drill down to what the details mean, you know, for specific subsectors of nonprofits. For childcare, when can non-essential workers return to work in the childcare setting?
Well, my expectation would be that would be around when the new guidance is released. And again, and I hate giving this answer, but the answer is still soon. And so the expectation is very soon. And that should answer those questions, both around schools and daycare, summer camps, and the like.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then there was a question about home-based teachers and concerns about their health and safety if they're offering home-based services as teachers.
I'll have to check in with the Department of Public Health and the folks working on the education guidance. Unfortunately, I just don't know the answer to that one.
Okay, great. Let's see. So it sounds like for after-school programs, a lot of that is kind of in the works. So do after-school programs then fit in that category of childcare, camps, or where do they fit in? Schools?
I would believe so, but I would want to double check.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, well, we will have additional time at the end of the webinar for some more reopening questions. So let's move on. And in the meantime, please continue to put your questions into the Q&A box and we will take them as we can. Thank you, Chris, very much. So now I want to turn it over to Isabel Guzman, who is going to talk about Office of Small Business Advocate and what you all do and how you can serve nonprofits. Isabel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the director of the Office of the Small Business Advocate, and I'll share my screen right now. But basically, we're one of the independent offices within GoBiz that focuses on supporting small businesses. We also support nonprofits. Our main objectives are providing information and assistance, so really connecting small businesses and others who are in need of similar type support to the resources that they need. In addition, we advocate on their behalf, especially around a few key policy areas of access to capital, access to marketplaces, meaning the revenue side of the equation, and access to networks and resources. We also focus on business resiliency and ensuring that our small businesses are able to continue to thrive. Oops, sorry, I didn't want to go there just yet. In terms of the response and recovery right now and some resources I feel that would be helpful, we do provide direct assistance, and our statute specifically allows us to support both small businesses and nonprofits. We can be found at business.ca.gov. Most of the inbound to GoBiz comes to our offices for vetting for any types of inquiries around capital or around issues of opening, et cetera. In addition, though, we have a few programs that help us expand our reach. One is the Entrepreneurship Task Force, which has been really focusing recently in a rapid response series of webinars on capital issues. We're trying to provide information, resources to everyone about the PPP or previously the EIDL loans or the state programs, et cetera. We've also leaned into the guidance and had a few sessions on not only how to reopen safely, but also how to better engage remotely with your constituents, and that includes ways that businesses have pivoted in this environment, adapted with technology to try to rethink their model. So all that information, all those webinars are available at business.ca.gov/ETF. The last one that I want to mention is the network of small business centers. The state of California funds every year a network of 86 centers currently that provide support to small businesses. These are federally contracted centers. And so many of them by federal requirement do not support nonprofits because they have very specific goals around capital and procurement contracts, et cetera. However, most of them either receive separate funding outside or they receive, of course, state funding, and so allows them to, of course, support all sorts of organizations. And so I would really suggest that you all get familiar with these centers, especially right now with additional CARES Act funding that they've received. They've leaned into PPP and all other types of capital. And so, and are familiar with what works for nonprofits and what do not. So this is, if you go to our business.ca.gov, website, then /centers, it lists all of the centers. And it's really the small business development centers or the women's business centers that would be most supportive and helpful to the nonprofit community. But I know that there were a few questions asked, for example, about the PPP program or specific questions you might have. These individuals are trained at the federal level as well as through my office at the state level to be very familiar with all the programs that are made available. But in addition, locally, they know what the grants are available from the cities and counties. They know a lot about private sector grants that are being made available. So definitely it's a good contact for you just because they have this awareness of all the different capital offerings for small businesses, and many of them are available to nonprofits as well. In addition, they lean into some specific topics that have been popular on this thread. Childcare. I'm on a webinar next week with our network of women's business centers as well as our small business development centers on the childcare business space specifically, and seeing how we can support them through guidance as well as strategy. So those centers are something that you should be familiar with. And through all of our programs, we're really trying to help businesses or nonprofits adapt in the environment, be aware of the tools that are available to you, and have the capital that's needed to do so. So with that, I will stop sharing. And if there are any questions, I know it's a very new topic area in terms of small business support specifically, but hopefully it's helpful to either your constituents or you as you're looking at your model and how you're surviving during this time.
It is very helpful, and we love that nonprofits are being included in the resources that are available for small businesses. That's really, really key. We think of ourselves as small businesses, but it's really nice to know that these resources are available. We did have one question that I've been able to see right now, but I'll keep looking for others. Can you talk a little bit about how the centers are functioning remotely right now because of the shelter in place and how people can access their services remotely?
Yeah, all of them have shifted to webinars and calls. Most of the small business development centers have daily webinars or calls available. I will note as well that our 86 centers speak 31 different languages. Those language capacities are on the mapping tool that I shared with you. So in terms of being able to serve a broad population, they've been incredible. And so while they have a lot of the availability in terms of their trainings that are more public, consulting is still being offered. That might take a little bit more time. I mean, I've heard that up to a week before you can actually schedule a one-on-one session. And, depending on the center, again, as I said, federally, they're not allowed to use those funds to support nonprofits, but our state funds and, of course, the money that they raise personally are allowed for that one-on-one consulting as well. But the trainings are super useful. And if you just go to those centers, one near you, and go to their website, you'll see different webinars and phone calls that you can participate in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Isabel. And we may have more questions for you, but let me turn it over now to Emily Burgos, the Small Business Finance Center Manager at IBank, who's going to talk to us about IBank loans and other things. Emily.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. My name is Emily Burgos. I manage the Small Business Finance Center at IBank. Again, that stands for the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, because we love acronyms. And we're actually part of GoBiz, so my signature block is just incredibly long. But what I want to do today, and just to be conscientious of folks that are speaking after me, is just to give a high-level overview of what I do and what I'm doing now in light of the pandemic. So we say Small Business Finance Center, but we've always meant nonprofits in that. We've always considered nonprofits as businesses under the Small Business Finance Center. So all of our programs, past, present, and future, would be available to any nonprofit that has at least one employee, but less than 750 employees. So that's quite a range. Right now, my main program is the Small Business Loan Guarantee Program. It is essentially, to sum it up, the state's version of the SBA 7A program. It is a loan guarantee product that's been around since the late 60s. It's provided in order to help businesses or nonprofits get loans from banks, credit unions, and CDFIs. So I come behind the bank, the credit union, or the CDFI, and I offer a guarantee on a loan to a nonprofit. So I essentially tell the lender, because they're always concerned about loss, if this loan goes bad, I will cover your loss up to 80% on a normal day. During the pandemic, however, I've been given an additional $50 million as of the beginning of April to assist folks who need disaster recovery loans. And for those loans, I'm able to provide guarantees up to 95%. So we're really pushing and incentivizing lenders to be able to make those loans to businesses. With this $50 million, we're really pushing for those loans under $50,000 and for folks that cannot access any SBA disaster resources. So that's the main piece on this program, is we want to make sure that we're filling the gaps that the SBA disaster programs are leaving behind. So when we look at eligibility in this program, we look at two main things. One, is the business eligible to be supported by our program? And two, are they using the money for an eligible purpose? These are pretty simple since our requirements are relatively broad. When we look at whether or not the business is eligible to be supported by our program, we look at their business activity. So typically we want to know that they're engaged in a legal business. We do have some limitations on lobbying activities, cannabis depending, and there's other things here and there that we do have limitations on, lending activities sometimes as well. But as a general rule of thumb, Most of what I'm seeing from your guys' organizations would be eligible under the program. One of the questions that we get pretty regularly is, are 501c6s automatically excluded? The answer is no, but we are going to ask questions and we are going to dive into the amount of lobbying activity that 501c6 is engaging in to determine if it's eligible. And then the next piece that we look at is, what are these folks going to be using the money for? So the guidance that we have says that the money must be used to cure economic injury. And that's pretty easy to explain when we're talking about something like an earthquake or a fire. So for example, with the Napa-Sonoma fires, people couldn't go wine tasting and businesses were able to show a dip in revenue. And then it was a pretty easy dollar amount to assign to that economic injury, and we could provide a guarantee on a loan to support that. In the pandemic situation, however, things are a bit different. So we've added in supporting loans for business continuance. So we really want to show that the loan proceeds are going to support either economic injury that's already been experienced or keeping the business in business to get through this. So at a high level, that's what we're able to do. And I'm going to share my screen with you real quick so you can see what we're offering on our website. This is the best place to check for information. I'm on calls every single day trying to recruit new lenders to the program. So if you're interested in who's making loans under this program, this is the best place to go. So my website is ibank.ca.gov. Right here at the top, we have the Business Loan Assistant. That is a tool that's been created by US Digital Response. You can go through and answer a couple of questions. It'll show you if you're available or eligible for federal programs and how to access those, and also has some information on our programs as well. I like to start here. It's an infographic. It explains the general mechanics of how to access one of our guarantees. The main takeaway is that you should apply directly with a lender. The lenders are going to be the ones that make the loans, and I'm going to come behind and guarantee them. So right now, I'm going to scroll below this. We have basic eligibility information that I've already covered. And then right here are the lenders so far that are using these programs. So right now, we have a handful of small regional lenders, mostly CDFIs, that are covering specific areas. These folks get their funding from different places, so that's why their geography is limited. I added this first one this morning. So when I say this is the best place to check for the most up-to-date information, it's because I add them when they start giving me applications and I take them down when they've run out of money. We're also working on getting a statewide lender on here and continue to expand the geography that these lenders are covering. So this is always the first place to check. The other thing I wanted to show you is that if you have questions, you can email us, and I'll type this in the chat as well. But we have a, right here, the COVID-19 loan at ibank.ca.gov is the best email address to reach out to. Though that email box is monitored every day by staff. When you send the email, you'll get an automatic response with some basic information. But should that not answer your question, a staff member is going to get back to you same day or next day with the answer to your question. So I'd like to pause there and see if we have any questions. I know with a group like this, you know, the basic boilerplate information that we give is not always specific enough for you. So I want to make sure I give the opportunity to ask some questions and answer them.
We do have some questions. Thank you, Emily.
No problem.
You mentioned that there is that opportunity to ask questions online, and this is, I guess, a question for either you or Isabel. If people are considering these loans generally and they've never applied for a loan before, is there a person they can work with at either of your offices to help them through this process? I know that ultimately they'll be working with the lender, but do you offer services sort of as folks are figuring out which lender to use?
So we really work with the network of SBDCs. They are our, they're very well trained. They are our technical assistance provider, and they can assist with loan readiness. Isabel, I didn't give you an opportunity to answer, but that was your answer, right?
That was my answer.
Okay,
And in fact, Emily
Great.
has generously trained them, a train the trainer session with all their advisors. So they're familiar with this program and can help you.
Wonderful.
It's the beauty of our state. We're really able to leverage what she does with what I do, and she's leveraging on all of these centers and all of their consultants. I am a staff of 4, and we receive, hundreds of inquiries a day or a week, depending on what's happening in the press, to be honest. So, I like to, at least before all of this happened, I like to talk to every single business, but that's just not possible anymore. And Isabel's centers and her network of consultants is really ready and prepared to assist with that.
Okay, great. So go to the centers for help. Okay. You mentioned 501c6s. We had questions about other 501c categories. Are they eligible as well?
Nothing is automatically excluded.
Okay.
Chances are, if you're not a 501c3 or a 501c6, I've never actually had to consider whether or not I could make a guarantee to you. So we're going to have questions. We want to know what it is that you do. For us, we call it business activity. What's your business activity? How do you make your money? What do you do on a daily basis? And then how do you plan on using the loan proceeds that I'm going to be guaranteeing? So know that we're digging into that so we can determine eligibility, not because we're just nosy and questioning stuff.
Okay, and is that true for nonprofits that are composed of all independent contractors?
It probably would be any new unique situation that we've come across, which a lot of these nonprofits are going to be. I'll just have some basic questions.
Okay. Yeah. And then we had a question here about, do you assist with accessing lines of credit?
Again, that's going to be a job for the centers. They're going to help you become loan ready, whatever kind of loan that looks like for you.
Okay. And then this may be a question for, well, let's see, folks are asking if these are loans you have to pay back, and they are loans you have to pay back. And I understand that the terms vary, right, depending on the lender that you work with. Is that correct?
Correct. The terms vary, but that 95% guarantee, if the lender wants it, they have to offer an interest rate of prime plus 1 or lower. So we've actually seen a lot of lenders lend much lower than what they normally do in order to get that 95%.
And then I believe you covered this, but I think it bears saying again, are folks eligible if they have received a PPP loan?
So at this point, the disaster program is only accessible for folks who cannot access SBA. So if you've received EIDL or PPP funds, this product is not for you today.
Okay, so for now, anyway, sounds like, okay.
I say for now because everything is always changing. I don't know what things are going to look like 30, 60, 90 days from now. And we've been very conscientious to keep the program nimble so that we can adjust with the market.
Wonderful. And then we had a question, is there a revenue limit for eligibility?
No.
Okay, in either direction?
Technically no, but
okay.
Since these are loans that need to be repaid, lenders are going to want to see repayment ability.
Okay, okay, great. And then Isabel, I know that you're tracking PPP and EIDLs. We had a question about whether EIDL is going to be made available again. I know right now it's only available for ag businesses. Do you have any inside scoop on that?
I do have not heard of any additional opening up of that. They're still trying to get caught up at this point, and I still have businesses who applied in March who are still just starting to hear back. So at this point, no. But I think we should continue to track what happens in future stimulus bills to see if they expand it.
Okay, great. And then we had a request for you, Isabel. You mentioned that childcare webinar through one of the centers. I don't know if that's something you can post information about in the chat box.
I actually did. I put.
Oh, did you? Great.
Links.
Okay, wonderful. I haven't had a chance to look at chat lately. Okay, great. Well, we will have some time at the end, hopefully, for more questions. But why don't we go now to Kathleen Kelly-Janis? Kathleen, would you tell us about other updates from the governor's office? Thank you
Sure.
so
Well,
much, Isabella. Yeah, go ahead, Kathleen.
of course, thank you so much, Lucy and Jan, for your leadership on behalf of nonprofits in our state during this time. CalNonprofits has been just an incredible resource for so many of our partners, and we're so grateful for all the work that you're doing. So I started in this role as Senior Advisor on Social Innovation 1 year ago tomorrow. It's my 1-year anniversary of my swearing in, and I remember at that time saying, this is a moment for partnership like never before, but never could I have imagined just how true that would be as we face this moment where we have an unprecedented global health crisis, the worst economic downturn in 100 years, and now nationwide calls for racial justice. And the reality is that we need our nonprofit partners more than ever to be our eyes and ears on the ground, serving communities and partnering with the states on our response efforts. So I just want to start by acknowledging all of you. Nonprofits are playing an unbelievably critical role right now, waking up every day to serve our communities in so many ways, whether it's the food banks that are putting food on people's tables, or the organizations that are serving vulnerable communities, making sure that they're getting tested for COVID-19, to the providers who are helping to house our unsheltered Californians, to the legal rights organizations that are fighting for racial justice, and all the other services that nonprofits are providing just to make sure that basic needs are met during times of crisis. And you're doing all of that at a time when we're facing both unprecedented demand as well as a decline in resources. So we acknowledge that this is a really challenging time for nonprofits as well. Earlier in the week, in response to the weekend's protests, the Governor Newsom responded for the outcries for national leadership by really turning it back on all of us. He said, leaders can be found everywhere, that leadership is not just some fancy title, and you don't have to be something to do something about what's happening. You are the leaders in your communities on the front lines, speaking truth to power, being the voices on behalf of our most vulnerable Californians. And we see your tireless work, and we appreciate you. And I can certainly say that we could not have flattened the curve in California, and we could not be facing this moment of crisis without you. So although this is a moment of crisis, I am an eternal optimist, and I also really believe that this is a moment of opportunity. In my first 8 months in this role, when we still had the luxury of leaving our houses, I actually traveled border to border in California, and I got to visit all the way to the tip top of Del Norte County in the north, down to the Tijuana border and the south, and I visited 16 cities, met with over 80 organizations. It's so much fun to see many of you in the chat box participating today, and convened with over 750 nonprofits, philanthropic, and business leaders. And for my background, I'm a 7th generation Californian, born and raised in Napa, and so I thought I knew this state, but it turned out that I had a lot to learn. And what I learned by traveling to visit so many nonprofit organizations and communities around our state is that showing up matters, that listening matters, and most importantly, that innovation is not just about the tech titans of Silicon Valley or the entertainment moguls of Los Angeles. It exists in every community across our state. Because while each community is unique, every single community has leaders working creatively to address these massive challenges that we face in our state, from homelessness to climate change. And this is only proven more true as we address COVID-19 and the current crisis on how to respond and recover. And it's just been such an amazing opportunity to watch organizations like the Edible Schoolyard Project, which is paying local farmers for their excess produce to feed local communities in Stockton and Berkeley with CSA boxes, or Education Superhighway, which is providing devices and hotspots to the 1 in 5 California students who doesn't have access to the technology that they need, or One Fair Wage, whose community kitchen program is not only keeping restaurants open, but also providing high road jobs. And community-based nonprofits have been so critical to supporting so many of the public-private partnerships that we've developed as a part of the response efforts. Governor Newsom has announced over 20 public-private partnerships, from our First in the Nation Undocumented Immigrant Fund to support cash payments for those who were left out of the CARES Relief Act, to the fund we announced last week with the Women's Foundation of California, in partnership with the California Partnership for Domestic Violence. I saw Krista is on, to support a gender-based approach to this recovery, and to ensure that we are supporting those who are experiencing domestic violence right now. None of these partnerships could have been possible without nonprofits on the ground, making sure that that they are implemented in a way that is responding to local community needs. And we need this community-led innovation now more than ever, because the system is not working. The historic protests that we are seeing on our streets are a reflection of too many people feeling left out for too long. But we have the opportunity to rebuild and to recover in a way that not only harnesses our state's history of innovation, but puts community at the center. And nonprofits are going to be really critical to ensuring that we actually do that, and to holding government accountable to do that, frankly. So we know that this has been an enormously difficult time for nonprofits, and I wanted to highlight one action that the state has taken to support nonprofits during this emergency. And that is that we know that so much has changed as a result of stay-at-home orders, which prevents nonprofits from fulfilling the terms of their state contracts and grants. And so I've been working closely with Jan and with Lucy and CalNonprofits to try and figure out if there's a way to build some flexibility into these contracts where permissible under law, given this statewide emergency order. Flexibility like on grant payouts or on the reporting processes. And we have heard that there are agencies that are doing an extraordinary job of this, like the Department of National Resources, which is reaching out to nonprofit partners proactively and creating the flexibility in state contracts. And so to ensure that this is happening across agencies, the Department of General Services circulated last week guidance to all state contractors to do the same. And we're going to be developing a recorded webinar for contractors at the state level to ensure that they have the tools they need to work with nonprofits closely to build flexibility into the contracts. And we also encourage all of you to reach out proactively to your agency partners to ask them if they would be willing to build that flexibility into your grants and contracts when appropriate. Having been a nonprofit leader myself, I know how challenging fundraising is even in the best of times, let alone now. So our hope is that this guidance will result in better support for nonprofits during this time of crisis. So finally, I just want to end by again saying thank you. Thank you for all of your tireless work for Californians. Thank you for being on the front lines of communities when our pandemic first struck. Thank you for all the work that you do to fight injustice and racism and stand up for reform. Thank you for your leadership, and you are helping our state move forward and ensuring that the most vulnerable among us are fed, housed, and heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. And thank you to Kathleen for those comments, but also thank you for bringing our wonderful speakers together for this webinar. Just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that. This wouldn't have happened without you. So we have a lot of questions, and we have questions of all of the speakers. So, and that includes reopening. So Chris, we've got questions for you. We have questions for Isabel and for Emily. So I am going to just jump in and try to identify which of you I think the question would be best to answer, but most of these it'll be pretty obvious. So folks are wondering about barbershops and hair salons. Chris, can you talk a little bit about when they'll be opening and what the process will be for that?
Yeah, that's one of those that right now is in the county by county variation. So we've issued the guidance for them. That is up on the county variation website. But again, it's for those counties that have passed the attestation process, but also it does rely on those counties to formally say that those places can reopen. So it is a county by county variance on that.
Great, thank you. And then this question, I'm going to kind of go back and forth between topics here because the questions are coming in for all of the topics. Are there webinars through the business centers on PPP forgiveness requirements in particular?
Yes, they're starting to navigate that. We're also co-hosting through the Entrepreneurship Task Force, I believe next week in our Rapid Response webinar series, the forgiveness specifically. One of our active members is highly engaged in this issue, and so we're co-hosting a series that she started last week. I will find it and put a link in. We co-hosted a series last week on forgiveness. It was the first round. We're doing a second round this next week. So I'll send you the link for the past recordings.
That would be great. And just so folks know, there have been questions about whether people will be able to access these links. We are going to send a follow-up email to everybody who registered for the webinar, and we will include as many of these links as we possibly can, and maybe a few others that our speakers send to us after the webinar. So rest assured you will be getting a lot of these links, but feel free to look in the chat. I know that the speakers have been posting them and will continue to post them through the end of the webinar, which we're almost at the end of time. So let's take a few more questions. Assistance for small nonprofits that don't have staff, can that happen through the business centers as well?
It depends what that means specifically. What kind of assistance? If it's, there's always sorts of training on, how to run your books, how to do marketing, things of that nature. So I guess it just depends. If it's skills development, yes, the centers offer lots of training for that type of thing.
Okay, and what about loan assistance through either IBank or?
Yeah, loan assistance is, most of our centers do access to capital, except maybe the procurement centers. So that's an issue that they could support with. And again, they have trainings as well.
Okay. And I think this might be an Emily question. Does the guarantee from IBank lower the loan interest rate at all?
So it's not required on a normal day that the guarantee lower the interest rate. However, with these disaster guarantees, we are incentivizing the lender to offer a lower guarantee so they can, offer a lower interest rate so I can give them a higher guarantee.
Okay, great.
We have seen that happen. Folks are offering lower interest rates because they want the full 95% guarantee.
Okay, great. And then Chris, back to you with some reopening questions. Museums and historic houses. So I know there's been a lot about outdoor museums, but can you give us a picture of what it might look like for indoor museums?
Absolutely. But again, unfortunately, it's going to be the very soon, the timing. But we do expect those counties, again, who are moving faster through stage 3 to have the opportunity to reopen indoor museums.
Okay. And then there's some confusion around the state guidance and county approval. If nonprofits meet the state guidance, do they still have to work with county officials around reopening?
You do, and the reason being is that counties may have additional criteria, additional guidelines that they want to see in place. So again, they have that authority. The state guidance doesn't supersede the county guidance, so you will have to work with your county public health officers.
And who are the best people at the county level for nonprofits to work with?
It's usually the public health departments, so we recommend them.
Okay, great. And then a couple more specific subsectors of the nonprofit community. Dance studios, martial arts, groups like that. What do you foresee?
Yeah, they'll also be very soon. You're going to see that probably lumped in with a general guidance document. Again, we can't do every single type of subsector, so you'll probably see that lumped into a category that we'll probably call something around fitness facilities.
Okay. And then what about organizations that do door-to-door outreach?
That one's going to require a little more information, but I'm happy
Okay.
to take that question offline.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'm noticing that we are almost out of time and we have so many questions. Chris, is there a place that folks can go to get more answers to their questions, specific questions around reopening?
I might suggest, if it's possible, that they could even follow up with you all, and then you could sort of give us a consolidated questions that remain unanswered, that we could probably try and group together and give you those responses to, something like that.
That's a great idea. We'll go through. We have a document that has everybody's questions in it. We've got chat questions as well as a Q&A. So we'll go through those and pull out the ones that seem, that we think you all can answer, and send those over to you. And it sounds like they can inform your guidances going forward. Great.
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to Kathleen and to Chris and to Isabel and Emily for your time, your expertise. And I am going to turn it over to Jan quickly for some closing comments. And thanks again to all of the speakers. Jan, over to you.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, speakers. It isn't often that nonprofits get a chance to speak directly with people in government. And so both to hear the answers to questions, but I think we're giving you messages through the questions that we're asking about how much we're doing and how much we still need to continue doing the work that we're doing. So I feel like our participants who have also contributed to that discussion, not just benefited from that conversation. So thanks to everybody. I know one question we want to ask people on this one is one of the things we're trying to figure out at CalNonprofits is how much nonprofit interest there is going to be in the IBank loans. So if you're seriously considering applying for an IBank loan, please put your name into the chat box so that we just have a sense of where that's going. If it's something we're going to see thousands and thousands of applicants or not very many at all, that'll help us plan. We're also working with the Small Business Administration to do a webinar on how to get forgiveness for your PPP loan. So those are things to be looking out for. And just as I think that it's never been clear how much nonprofits are needed by today's society, it's also never been more clear how much government is needed and also how much advocates are needed. A lot of these things that we're able to take advantage of, as our speakers have talked to us about, have been made possible because of advocacy by nonprofits in California for so many years, making sure that nonprofits are recognized as an economic powerhouse and recognized as important contributors to the economy, as well as important service providers and representatives of people who don't have other voices. So thanks very much to everybody, and we'll see you next time.